Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. Um, I'm doing pretty good. I just sort of got done with a coding sprint, I guess is what they call it. I just call it a lot of coding. The past 2 weeks I've been working on a new feature on Turbo, which I just got sort of wrapped up, and I'm excited to roll it out. So I'll let you know when we're ready to do the rollout. We're just doing some quick beta testing right now. And as usual, I really appreciate all the feedback I've been getting from the people on the Slack channel. So Christian, Taylor, I really appreciate it. Ian Daly, appreciate it. All the feedback you guys can give. It's very helpful. Um, so yeah, that's it. So today I want to talk about generally two kinds of startups that I've worked with in the past 6 years as a developer. Um, so the startups I deal with are predominantly early stage startups, so Series A and before that. So typically seed level startups are what I'm dealing with. And by seed level, I mean anywhere from 100,000 to about $1 million of funding raised, and they use that funding to do their product development. And I'm typically a part of that development team or the entire team, development team of one. So these startups break down generally into two categories. The first category is like the bro startup, right? These guys are just like basically two guys who are non-technical, and they're just in love with the startup fantasy kind of, watching too many movies, Social Network, and hearing about Snapchat and stuff like that. And they're like, well, we can just get some programmer to hammer out our idea, and we'll make $1 billion by the time we're 25 years old or whatever. And that's the bro startup, right? That's the it's not really a technical type of startup. Um, it's more sort of business guys or wannabe business guys wanting to be startup guys. That's kind of weird. Like wannabe business guys being wannabe startup guys, kind of. And their only real advantage is money. So typically they can raise money because they come from backgrounds where that's not a hard thing to do. And so for them, raising $1 million is not hard at all. These bro startups are very common. They probably consist of about half of my startup volume in the past 5 or 6 years. I don't really work with them anymore. It's something you sort of graduate from. Like those guys don't really, they're not really the long-term plays. Like the 99% of them phase out. Um, uh, but as long as they have $300,000 to burn of somebody else's money, you may as well take some of that if they need a programmer. And as long as you're doing what they ask you to do, hey, that's the job, right? Um, they need you to build a website where you can sell whatever, and as long as you build it, then that's you did what you were paid to do. And the other startup, the other kind, is the truly technical startup, right? Basically led by a tech founder or a tech team, and they're building a technical product. Right? This is a tech startup, a true tech startup. Um, this is not like these people aren't in it because they um, are in love with the startup fantasy. They're not really in it because they see a lifestyle on TV and in the newspapers and whatnot and think like, I want to live that lifestyle. Um, no, they're truly in it because they love the tech and working with tech, and that breeds a whole other set of startups, of which was probably 40 to 50% of my work volume in the past 5 years. Um, a bro startup can evolve into a tech startup, like a true tech startup. But I don't really. That's a tough transition. It's not something I see very often. The bro startups typically more phase out. They flame out. They burn out a runway. They can't raise another round, and then that's the end of that. But if they're starting to get any kind of traction, um, they hire a tech team, and they might become a true tech startup. More tech play. I don't know the story behind it, but I think maybe Stripe might be a good example of this, where I mean Stripe was a technical play right from the get-go, so I don't know if that's the best example, but Stripe is a financial company, not truly a tech company. That they're not building tech for tech's sake, um, but because they became so successful. Or a better example might be Uber. Uber is a good example. Uber is obviously there's technology behind Uber, right? Because you need the iPhone to order your cab and whatnot. But the fundamental nature of the product is not really a tech-oriented product. Airbnb is another good example. Um, it's fundamentally not a technological product. However, because they've scaled so big, so fast, and they have so many users now, they they have to become technically sophisticated to support their user base. So like Uber has all these optimized routes and whatnot, and Airbnb probably has a very sophisticated system for weeding out like fake hosts and fraudulent accounts, things like that. So they become a much more technically sophisticated play. Now those companies I don't work with because I don't go to that level. I stay at the Series A and lower, just because I like having options. I don't want to work full time for a certain company. I'm doing Turbo now full time anyway, so it's not like I can do Turbo while I'm working at Uber full time, right? So that's why I choose to contract the way I do. Okay, so getting to my major point. So you have your bro startups and your truly tech startups. Why do I care if I'm a developer? If you're watching this video, why do you care about any of this? So um, what you want to do when you're looking for jobs, or if you have an interview coming up, sending out resumes, whatever, is you kind of want to evaluate which one of those two categories you're looking at. Assuming you're even looking at that. Like maybe you're looking for a full-time job at Facebook. That's a whole different conversation. I'm not going to get into that. So let's say you're applying to these jobs. If this is your first time out, then you're actually better off looking for a role at one of these bro startups, because these guys are not good at evaluating tech talent. In fact, they're flat out bad at it. Right? There's gross inefficiency amongst bro startups as far as tech is concerned. They'll hire a guy who's worth about $30 an hour and erroneously pay him 75 because they can't evaluate the skill, and that happens all the time. And like I said, I was that guy once, 2012, so 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, I was that guy. I was billing $100 an hour. I just got lucky. That's it. I was not good at that point. I was not worth $100 an hour. Since that job, I have taken other roles at less than $100 an hour because I wasn't able to like recreate that luck. So, and I'm using the term bro kind of like inaccurately. Like it could be girls too. Like some of the clients I've had have been women, and they were effectively bro startups, just people who were able to raise a lot of money, and they don't have any technical sophistication whatsoever. Even though they think they do, they don't. And then they'll hire, they'll make a hire that they shouldn't have made. I'm not saying I was a mistake or anything like that, but you get the point. Like their hiring decision is not good. Anyway, so these startups can work to your advantage if you're having a hard time breaking into the industry, because if you're looking at the other side, the tech startups. So my startup, I guess you can call it a startup now, Turbo 360. This is a bona-fide tech startup. It's a tech product. It's led by a technical founder, me, and we're hardcore tech, right? We're not delivering candy bars and fruit to your door once a month and calling that a startup. That's not what we do. Right? We want to be the infrastructure upon which those companies build their startups, right? That's what I'm trying to get to. So, I'm a tech startup. Now, that being said, what that means for me is that when I'm looking at resumes and people who want to work for me, I can evaluate in a second. Okay, I'm exaggerating. Maybe 30 seconds whether or not this guy has the chops or not, right? The better way to put it is I can evaluate within 30 to 60 seconds if a person doesn't have what it takes. It takes a little bit longer to see if they do have what it takes, but it doesn't take long at all to see if a person doesn't have what it takes. And it's clear as day. It's just very clear this person doesn't have what it takes. And these bro startups, generally, they're not even looking at the right things. Right? These people don't know about GitHub. They literally don't know what GitHub is. They don't know how to read a GitHub repo. Obviously, they don't know what GitHub is. They don't know what to look for in the source code of a website. Right? They don't even know how to look at the source code. So when I get a website, in in my email, right? Let's say I'm looking at a website like this. This so-and-so submitted his resume looking for a junior dev job, and this is his website, right? Turbo 360. I don't even look at this. I go right to here. This is immediately where I go. And then I start looking at certain code conventions and whatnot. First thing I look is, are the indentations in place? You'd be amazed at how many people don't even care about their indentations. Immediate no-go for me, because what that means is that person's going to submit code to me that's not properly indented, and then I'm going to have to clean all that crap up. I'm not doing that. I'm just not doing that. Next thing I look for is just how well is it organized. Is he using CDN? See, these are CDN links. Is the code minified? So if I click on this, is this a minified CSS file? It is, right? I just check. Are there any security exposures here? So oftentimes you'll see in this current user JSON there's like a password in there snuck in there. That's no good. You don't want anything like that, obviously. More CDNs here. Is this minified code right here? And so forth and so on. And then once I look over all that, which takes me about a minute, give or take, then I go back here and actually just literally look at the aesthetic, right? And this is what a tech person does. This is what almost every experienced tech person will do. So I guess what I'm trying to say is when you're applying to a tech startup, even if it's a seed funded startup, even if it only has $100,000 or $50,000, not that much money, doesn't matter. The person who's making the decisions are holding you to a completely different standard. They're looking literally at completely different things. And they're judging you by completely different metrics than the bro startups. So what that means is when you're starting out, you actually want to find the bro startups and get your feet wet in there and start to get, that's a good way to get in, because they're evaluating you on the wrong things. So imagine you're at the NFL Combine. For you football fans out there, imagine you're at the NFL Combine and your job is to evaluate the next year's crop of college football players, right, at the Combine. And I'm at the Combine too, and I'm a competing general manager. But I make my evaluations completely based on how nice everyone's hair looks. Imagine that. That's how I evaluate college football players. I just look at how nice everyone's hair looks, and I make my draft decisions based on that. While you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, measuring the 40 time, how many, the 225 bench press, the vertical, stuff like that. What you're supposed to be doing. Well, I'm the GM who doesn't even know what the 40-yard dash is. Like, what's a good 40 time? 8 seconds? 10 seconds? 6 seconds? I don't know, right? So imagine that, and I'm making these decisions. Well, who's going to win this situation, right? So you want to be, if you're having a hard time breaking in, and you really don't know where to get started, if you're trying to get into the industry, this is a good way of looking at it to get in. Now, you don't want to work at a pro startup for too long. You won't even have that option. They won't be around too long. But you want to use that to get in and build up a portfolio of work. You know, one or two of these bro startups that just hired you because they were desperate and you're willing to work for 25 bucks an hour, 30 bucks an hour, some cut rate that, you know, a senior dev like me wouldn't even consider, right? So as far as how to even get those jobs, I had mentioned this in one of my previous videos, but I'll say it again just for reiteration here. As far as the bro startups goes, what you want to do is appeal to their sense of vanity, appeal to their vanity. So these startups, they want to think like they're competing with the Ubers and the Lyfts and the Airbnb. They want to feel like they're in that league of competition, even though they clearly are not. So what you want to do is play into that, right? You want to play into that. You want to impress them. Oh, not impress them. You want to flatter them is the word I'm looking for. You want to flatter them and say things like, this is a really cool idea. I like where this is going. I think this has a lot of potential. You guys are really onto something. That's a good phrase. You're really onto something here. I'd love to work on this, that kind of thing. And phrase it in such a way that you would consider joining them full time if they offered you. That's always a question that comes up. Every single interview that comes up is, if things go well, if we have a good working relationship, would you consider joining us full time? What are you going to say? No? So say, yeah, of course, if things go well, really well, I'll consider joining you full time. Now, whenever I say that, I mean, it might come off as disingenuous. It's actually true. It's just that things never go well. These startups all crash and burn. Okay, well, there's nothing to join full time. You don't exist as a company anymore. Which brings me to my next point. If you are able to land one of these, bro startup jobs, which you should be able to. I mean, these aren't like the hardest things to get. Then you want to parlay that into a tech startup as soon as you can. So maybe hammer it out for 3 months, 4 months at the most. Get something done that you can show. Extremely important. Something done that you can show. Like point to a certain website, say, I built that feature, I built that entire website, I built the database, whatever. Something you can show. And then immediately start looking for the next gig at a tech startup. And by that, I generally mean a startup that's led by a tech person, right? The senior leadership are technical people. That's what you want to be doing, like a data science startup, a machine learning startup, or turbo, like a full stack web startup, or I'm more of an infrastructure play now, but a tech startup. Why? Okay, because if you're working at a bro startup, I'll bet dollars to donuts that startup won't be around in 12 months. I'll bet tens of thousands of dollars that startup won't be around in 12 months. So if that happens, basically what that means is you have 12 months to show off the work. You follow? So you have 12 months where you have a portfolio piece that's live on the internet before they go out of business, and you have all the work you have is literally invisible. So I have also mentioned in another video that some of the best work I ever did, I literally can't show people because the companies don't exist anymore. One of the best iPhone apps I ever made, to this day I'm so proud of it. It was a beautiful app. Very nice animated transitions, and lots of I had to put together the database, which is very hard with all these many tables, etc. I can't show it to anybody because the company doesn't exist anymore, and that's that, right? So I had to start building my own apps that are in the App Store still today, explicitly as showcase pieces. I had to take months out of my own personal time to build a couple apps that to this day they're still in the App Store, that only exist to show how nice my work is. Actually, I'll just show you. I don't know why I'm just speaking abstractly. iPhone app. All right, I built this about 2 years ago. Oh, 3 years ago now. Wow. Okay. So here's an iPhone app I built about 3 years ago, whose only purpose, I built this in about 2 weeks. The only reason I built this iPhone app was to show some nice animated transitions and image manipulation. That's it. That's the only reason I built that. And then I built this one a couple months later for the same reason. These apps are actually still in the App Store. You can download them and check them out. Like this app right here, I built over a period of about 6 or 7 weeks. The only reason I built it was to show off my iPhone skill and how I can make nice looking transitions and animations and things like that. Now, I didn't really have to do that if the other company that I worked with just didn't go out of business. That's all. I would have used that work. But at the time, they didn't exist. They went out of business, and I had nothing to show. I was kind of in a pinch for a couple of weeks. I was like, oh crap! Like, I got nothing to show. Like, I'm sending out resumes with links that don't exist anymore. I'm kind of in a tough spot, right? And so I kind of hunkered down, and I put together a couple apps like this, just to show. Here's another one, just to show what I can do visually, right? And I built the database and everything also. Like, I built the front end, back end, all that crap. So it you have to understand that uh, being able to show your work is of paramount importance, and it's also like the most overlooked thing of junior developers. I really don't know why this is not like a well understood concept. So anyway, you want to break in with these bro startups because that's probably your easiest entry point, and then you want to build something that you can show as quickly as you can, which is going to be somewhere between 3 and 6 months. And then once you do that, somewhere towards the end of that period, you should start looking for the next role. Right? You don't want to be at a bro startup for too long. Again, you won't even have that option. They won't exist for too long. Anything more than 18 months is exceeding expectations. So, so what you want to do is parlay that into a startup, a tech startup that has longer term stability, smarter leadership, better trajectory, better foundations is really what I'm getting at. And then from there, you want to learn as much as you can. Then your career has begun. You want to learn as much as you can from senior leadership. Now that I think about it, that's actually how it ended up for me. I started out at a couple bro startups in early 2012. I did that for a few months, for about 4 or 5 months. Just, shitty startups that had no chance of success, and they're non-technical founders, and they just needed somebody who can make an iPhone app. And that's also how I ended up getting paid $100 an hour, because they couldn't evaluate my skill. They didn't have the personnel to evaluate my skill. So as far as they were concerned, they're like, this guy looks like he knows what he's doing. $100 an hour, right? So I did that for basically the winter of 2012, and then that ended, and I had some stuff to show for a little bit, and I parlayed that into a real technical gig where I learned a fuck ton of how to code, how to architect large code bases, how to deal with database failures, how to scale to thousands of users. This particular project had about 30,000 daily active users, which I don't know if that's a lot in your world, but from where I came, it was unimaginable every day. I remember at one point the database was down for like 15 minutes, and which is not that long, and within seconds we were getting tweets and emails saying, yo, what the fuck, my data's not showing up. That's how you're dealing with a successful situation. When things go down for a little bit, like almost immediately you're getting like hammered on Twitter, and people are telling you like that's when you know you got something. And so that wasn't a startup, that was a dev shop, but it I was able to parlay the earlier roles, my earlier experience, which was minimal, but it was professional experience. And I was able to parlay that into a legit technical role at amongst senior leadership who just knew what they were doing, very professional, and I just leveled up. I just got so much better in that short period of time. I learned more in that short period of time than I learned in the preceding 2.5 years, right? So your goal should be to parlay that trajectory. If you're struggling, like this isn't universal advice. No, I'm not saying everyone should do this. What I'm saying is if you're having a hard time breaking in, this is a legitimate option. I've seen a lot of people pull this off who I don't consider very good programmers. So, and for a while, I was one of those people. Again, I want to be clear. Early 2012, I was not a good programmer. I don't know if I would say bad, but pretty close to it. Nowhere near professional grade. Just to give you an example, I didn't even version control my code. Right? That's pretty clownishly bad. That was me in 2012, and I was able to still parlay that into a job or a contract at a bro startup, with a startup who led by a guy who just didn't know anything about programming. He just wanted to make a cool social networking app that he thought would be the next Facebook, and obviously that didn't happen. And I can't show you this one because the app doesn't exist anymore. Like it's not on the App Store, right? So that's what I mean. You need to parlay that into a legit situation as much as you can. Now, the dev shop role I had after that, during the spring and summer of 2012, I did not make $100 an hour. The guy in charge was able to assess my skill much more efficiently, and he was able to assess where I really belong in the marketplace much more efficiently. Because he's a technical guy. He was an iOS guy in addition to a bunch of other stuff. However, even though I took a haircut on the payment, what I got back in education far exceeded the drop in my payment. I would have worked there for free. So that's what you want to do, is somehow get into a position where you can just level up your skill, because no matter where you are right now, college, grad school, boot camp, whatever, your education doesn't begin until you start working, and not even when you start working, but when you start working at a startup, in a tech environment. It doesn't have to be a startup. It could obviously, if you get a job at Amazon, you'll be just fine, right? But my point is, your education begins in that environment, that hardcore tech environment where you have to start producing, and you're surrounded by people who are just good at their job, and they just level you up. You just have to catch up. And depending on your sort of personal disposition, either you do or you don't. Either you catch up and you move on to the next level, or you weed out and you quit. And that's how the world works, and that's it. But the point is, you need to somehow get into that second job as soon as you can. Again, this is not universal advice. There are many people for whom this just doesn't matter. They get that first job right off the bat, and it's right away it's a good job. High level software architect at Tesla or something like that. And that's fine. That's great. That you don't need to hear this. But don't forget, there are people for whom it takes a little bit more elbow grease to break in, and you might be one of them if you're watching this video. And if so, this is a legitimate path. So it was my path. That's how I broke in. Because remember, I did not major in CS. I had no professional programming background when I moved to the city, and I needed some way to just get going, and that's how I did it. So okay, so I hope this video helped. I hope we gave you some good insight on how you can get going with your tech career, I guess. And if you have any questions or any feedback, shoot me. Well, don't shoot me an email. Just join me on Slack, which I think means you have to shoot me an email. So on Slack, here is my email. So that's my email, and if you're interested in joining my Slack channel, just shoot me an email there, and I'll send you an invite right away. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.